The morning bells rang across the Galactic Defense Academy, their deep sounds echoing through the vast halls filled with students from dozens of worlds. In Classroom 7 on the third floor, beings of all shapes and sizes took their seats for advanced combat theory. There were the tall, blue-skinned Nexari with their proud bearing and sharp features. The rocky-looking Gravani spoke in low, rumbling voices as they settled into reinforced chairs. Quick-moving insectoid Klaxi clicked their mandibles in greeting. To each other and in the very back corner, almost hidden behind a support pillar, sat a small human girl named G-1. She was 19 years old, but looked younger. Her black hair was cut short and practical, hanging just above her shoulders. Her clothes were always neat and clean, Regulation Academy uniform without any personal touches. While other students decorated their desks with pictures from home or small trinkets, G1's space was completely bare. She carried only what she needed, nothing more. G1 arrived early to every class and chose the same seat each time. Back row, corner position, where she could see all the exits and keep her back to the wall. She sat straight in her chair, hands folded, dark eyes watching everything but revealing nothing. When other students laughed or talked before class started, she remained silent. When they complained about homework or discussed weekend plans, she listened but never joined in. The professor, an elderly Nexari named Kelver, entered the room with his usual dramatic flair. His blue skin showed the silver markings of high rank, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets. "Today we discuss the Battle of Vortex Nebula," Professor Kelver announced, his three eyes scanning the room. "Who can tell me why the human forces failed so completely against the Vortex invasion?" Several hands shot up. A Nexari student named Korvik spoke first, his voice full of confidence. "The humans were too emotional. They panicked when their defensive lines broke. A proper military force would have maintained discipline." Other alien students nodded in agreement. Gwan's expression did not change, but her hands tightened slightly in her lap. "Exactly correct," Professor Kelver said with satisfaction. "Humans are still new to galactic warfare. They lack the experience and mental discipline of established species. Their emotional responses make them unreliable in crisis situations." In the back corner, G1 stared down at her desk. She had heard variations of this lecture many times. Humans were weak. Humans were emotional. Humans broke under pressure. The other species said it with such certainty, as if they had tested every human who ever lived. After class, as students filed out discussing the lesson, a young human male approached G1's desk. His name was Taemin, and he had tried to talk to her several times before. He was friendly and outgoing, everything G1 was not. His uniform showed small decorations and pins that marked various achievements. He smiled easily and seemed to know everyone. "Hey, you won," Taemin said, adjusting his backpack. "That was pretty rough, huh? The way they talk about humans like we're all the same." One gathered her few belongings slowly and carefully. "The professor was sharing historical facts," she said quietly, not looking at him. "Come on," Taemin laughed, but it sounded forced. "You know it's more than that." "They think we don't belong here? Like we're only here because the council felt sorry for us or something." One stood up, slinging her plane bag over her shoulder. She was several inches shorter than Taemin and much thinner. Next to his confident posture, she looked almost fragile. "Perhaps they have reasons for their opinions," she said in the same quiet voice. "You don't really believe that, do you?" Taemin asked, walking beside her as they left the classroom. "I mean, humans have done amazing things. We went from one planet to exploring the galaxy in just a few hundred years. That has to count for something." They walked through the wide corridor filled with students from many worlds. The ceiling stretched high above them, decorated with murals showing great battles and peace treaties from galactic history. Most of the images showed alien heroes. Very few included humans. "Humans are new here," one replied simply. "We must prove ourselves worthy of trust." Taemin stopped walking, causing a few other students to move around them. "Worthy of trust?" "G1, we're not asking for charity. We earned our place at this academy just like everyone else. We passed the same tests, met the same requirements. Ji-won paused and looked at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black and completely unreadable. For a moment, Timon thought he saw something deeper there, like looking into a well at night. Then she blinked and the moment passed. I must go to my next class, she said and walked away. Taemin watched her go, frustrated by the conversation. Ji-won moved through the crowded hallway like a ghost, somehow avoiding bumping into anyone despite the busy traffic. She seemed to predict where others would move before they did it themselves. It was subtle, but if someone paid attention, they might notice she never had to stop or change direction suddenly like other students did. In the cafeteria during lunch, the natural divisions showed clearly. Each species tended to sit together, eating foods suited to their biology and discussing matters in their own languages. The human students usually gathered at 3 tables near the windows, sharing stories from their different homeworlds and complaining about difficult professors. One sat alone at a small table in the corner, eating standard nutrition blocks, without apparent interest. She ate efficiently, not for pleasure but simply because her body needed fuel. While she ate, her eyes constantly moved, tracking the movement of students and staff around the large room. She knew where every exit was located. She knew which tables had the best view of approaching threats. She knew which species moved fastest and which ones carried concealed weapons despite academy regulations. Nari. Her roommate sometimes tried to convince her to sit with the other humans. Nari was bubbly and energetic, the kind of person who made friends easily and brightened any room she entered. She came from a peaceful farming world and talked constantly about her large family back home. You know, you're welcome to sit with us any time, Nari had said that morning while they got ready for classes. Everyone thinks you're really mysterious and cool. Some of the girls think you might be from some secret military family or something. Yuan had continued brushing her teeth without responding. Mystery was safer than truth. In advanced physical training that afternoon, instructor Hyan Woo put the students through combat simulation exercises. He was a stern man with graying hair and scars that suggested real military experience. Unlike some of the academic professors, he treated all species equally, which meant he was equally demanding of everyone. Combat is not about strength alone, he announced to the mixed group of sweating students. It is about thinking quickly, adapting to changing situations, and never giving up when others would quit. The students practiced basic hand-to-hand techniques against holographic opponents. The holograms were programmed to represent different alien species they might face in real conflicts. Ji-won partnered with a Gravani student whose rocky hide made strikes difficult. While other students struggled and grunted with effort, Ji-won moved with quiet efficiency. Her techniques were textbook perfect. Not innovative or creative, but executed with mechanical precision. She blocked attacks at exactly the right angle, struck at proper target points, and maintained correct distance from her opponent. It was adequate performance, nothing more, instructor. Han Woo watched all his students carefully, making notes on his electronic pad. Ji-won caught his attention not because she was exceptional, but because she was too controlled. Most students showed frustration when techniques did not work perfectly, or excitement when they succeeded. Ji-won showed nothing. She simply performed. Each movement as if following a recipe. After class, as students headed to the showers, Hyun-woo called out to her. Gi-won, a moment. She approached his desk and stood at attention, waiting. Your form is very good, he said, studying her face. But you fight like someone following a manual. Combat is not about perfect technique. It is about adapting, improvising, surviving. Do you understand? Yes, sir, she replied. Where did you learn to fight before coming here? Standard self-defense courses, sir. Required education on my home world. Hyun-woo nodded, but something in her answer felt incomplete. He had trained thousands of students from hundreds of worlds. Most carried their training like new clothes, still stiff and uncomfortable. Ji-won wore her skills like old skin, natural and unconscious. Very well. You may go. That evening, Ji-won sat in her dorm room while Nari chattered about her day. Their room was standard academy issue, with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a shared bathroom. Nari's side was covered with pictures, plants, and colorful decorations. Ji-won's side looked like a military barracks, clean and functional with no personal items visible. Nari paused in her story about drama in advanced diplomacy class. Ji-won, can I ask you something? Yes, do you miss home? I mean, I know you never talk about your family or your world, but don't you get homesick sometimes? Ji-won sat on her bed, reading a tactical manual for tomorrow's classes. She did not look up when she answered. Home is not always a place worth missing. Ji-won sat on her bed, reading a tactical manual for tomorrow's classes. She did not look up when she answered. Home is not always a place worth missing. Nari wanted to ask more, but something in Ji-won's voice warned her away from the subject. Instead, she returned to her cheerful chatter about classes and friends and the upcoming academy festival. Later, after Nari fell asleep, Ji-won lay in her narrow bed staring at the ceiling. The room was never completely dark, thanks to the soft glow of emergency lighting in the hallways. She could hear the sounds of the academy at night, the hum of life support systems, the distant voices of students in other rooms, the footsteps of security patrols. These sounds were comforting because they meant safety. They meant she was not alone in empty ruins with only the wind and her own heartbeat for company. They meant she was not hunting or being hunted in the dark. But sometimes, late at night when the academy was quiet, she could still hear other sounds. The clicking of insectoid legs on metal floors, the hiss of alien breathing, the screams that had echoed through her nightmares for 3 years. Ji-won closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, using techniques she had taught herself long ago. Slow inhale, slower exhale, push away memories that wanted to surface. She was safe now, she was hidden now. She was just another quiet student who would graduate, find some simple job, and disappear into a peaceful life. No one needed to know about the war she had fought alone. No one needed to know about the bodies she had left behind. No one needed to know that the silent girl in the back of the classroom had killed more enemies than most veteran soldiers ever would. She was just Ji-won now. The girl who sat in corners and spoke only when necessary. The girl who blended into backgrounds and caused no trouble. And that was exactly how she wanted it to stay. 3 months passed at the Galactic Defense Academy like pages turning in a book. Ji-won settled into her quiet routine of classes, meals alone, and careful invisibility. She had perfected the art of being present but unnoticed, like furniture, that served its purpose without drawing attention. The other students had mostly stopped trying to include her in their conversations. Even Taemin's friendly attempts had become less frequent, though he still nodded to her in hallways and saved seats that she never took. Nari continued her cheerful chatter in their shared room, but she had learned not to expect responses to personal questions. It was during a joint training exercise on a Tuesday morning that everything changed. The exercise took place in the Academy's large simulation chamber, a room that could recreate any environment using advanced holographic technology. Today it showed the ruins of an ancient city, complete with collapsed buildings, twisted metal, and scattered debris. The assignment was a rescue operation. Teams of mixed species had to locate and extract injured civilians while avoiding hostile forces. Ji-won found herself assigned to Team 7. Along with Taemin, 2 Nexari students including Korvek, a Gravani named Thok, and a nervous Klaxi called Zik Zik. The team leader was Korvik, chosen because Nexari were considered natural commanders by most instructors. "The mission is simple," Korvik announced to his team, his blue skin showing the confident patterns that marked his high social status. "We locate the civilians, establish a safe extraction route, and complete the rescue within 30 minutes. Humans will carry medical supplies. Gravani will handle heavy lifting. Klaxi will scout ahead. Nexari will coordinate and command." Ji-won accepted the medical pack without comment, slinging it over her shoulders next to her regular equipment. The weight was familiar and comfortable. Though she did not let that show on her face, the simulation began with the sharp sound of an alarm. Immediately, the team could hear distant sounds that were meant to represent enemy forces, explosions, and civilian cries for help. The holographic city around them looked and felt completely real, down to the smell of smoke and the crunch of broken glass under their boots. Korvik led them through the streets, using standard academy formations. They moved in a tight group, checking corners and communicating through hand signals they had learned in class. Everything proceeded exactly as their training manuals suggested. The first civilian was located quickly, a holographic representation of an injured Gravani trapped under a fallen beam. Thok easily lifted the debris while Taemin provided medical attention. The rescue went smoothly and the team's confidence grew. The second civilian was harder to reach, located on the third floor of a damaged building. Zik scouted ahead and reported that the stairs were mostly intact. Again, the rescue proceeded without major problems. It was the third civilian that changed everything. The hologram showed a young Nexari child trapped beneath a large section of collapsed ceiling in what had once been a school. The debris was a complex puzzle of concrete slabs, twisted metal supports, and broken pipes. Water leaked from somewhere above, and the entire structure looked ready to collapse further at any moment. Korvik studied the situation, referring to his training materials. "We need to approach this systematically," he said. "First, we stabilize the outer supports, then we create a safe working space, then we begin carefully removing debris piece by piece." "That will take too long," Thok rumbled in his deep voice. "The child is losing blood. Look at the medical readings." Indeed, the holographic child's vital signs were declining steadily. In a real situation, following standard procedures would mean death for the victim. "Standard procedures exist for good reasons," Korvik replied firmly. "We cannot risk the entire team for one civilian. We follow protocol." The team began the slow process of stabilizing supports and creating working room. But as they worked, the child's condition grew worse. The medical scanner showed dropping blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, and other signs of impending system failure. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The child was dying. "We have to move faster," Taemin said. "Urgently. There has to be another way." "There is no other way," Korvik snapped. "We follow procedures or we fail as a team. Individual heroics get people killed." That was when G1 stepped forward. She had been standing quietly at the edge of the group, apparently waiting for orders like the good follower everyone expected her to be. But now she moved with sudden purpose, walking directly to the debris pile and kneeling beside it. Double quotes. G-1, what are you doing?" Taemin asked. She did not answer. Instead, she placed her hands on different sections of the debris, pressing gently, and listening to the sounds the structure made in response. Her movements were quick and precise, like someone reading a language others could not see. "The support beam here is cracked," she said quietly, pointing to a spot that looked identical to every other piece of twisted metal. "If we remove the concrete section there first, the weight redistributes to this junction point. That will cause a controlled collapse of the upper section, but it will also shift this central piece exactly 42 centimeters to the left." The team stared at her. Her voice had changed, becoming sharp and clear instead of soft and hesitant. More importantly, her words made perfect technical sense despite being delivered with impossible confidence. "How do you know that?" Korvik demanded. One was already moving. "Help me with this piece," she said to Thok, indicating a specific chunk of concrete. "When I say now, pull straight up and back, not to the side, straight back." Something in her voice made the Gravani obey without question. As he pulled, G1 simultaneously pushed against two other sections of debris. The effect was immediate and exactly as she had predicted. The upper section collapsed in a controlled fashion, creating an opening just large enough for rescue. Zik, you are smallest," G1 continued, her commands coming fast and clear. "Crawl through that gap. Do not touch the metal supports on either side. Taemin, prepare the medical kit for immediate blood loss treatment and possible spinal injury." The insectoid student scrambled through the opening and reached the trapped child. Within minutes, they had the victim extracted and receiving medical attention. The simulation registered a successful rescue with 0 team casualties. The exercise ended with the sound of completion bells. The holographic ruins faded away, replaced by the plain gray walls of the simulation chamber. The team stood in silence, staring at G1. She had returned to her quiet demeanor as quickly as she had abandoned it. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, her eyes focused on the ground, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked exactly like the shy, unremarkable girl they had known for months, but they had all seen what had just happened. They had heard. The confidence in her voice, witnessed the precision of her movements, watched her solve a complex structural puzzle in seconds while their designated leader was still consulting his manual. "Where did you learn to do that?" Korvik asked, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "Basic engineering principles?" Juwon replied softly. "Anyone could have figured it out with enough time." "No," Fox said slowly. "That was not basic engineering. That was experience, real experience." One gathered her equipment, moving with the same mechanical efficiency she always showed. "We should report to the instructors for debriefing," she said, but as they walked toward the exit, Taemin noticed something he had missed before. Jiwon's hands were perfectly steady despite the intense situation they had just completed. Her breathing was normal, her movements controlled. She showed no signs of adrenaline or stress, response that would be normal after such a high-pressure exercise. It was as if rescuing people from collapsed buildings was something she did every day. The debriefing session was led by instructor Hyeon Woo, who had monitored the entire exercise from the control room. He reviewed each team's performance, noting successes and areas for improvement. When he reached Team 7, his expression was thoughtful. "Excellent work on the final rescue," he said. "Quick thinking and good team coordination. Korvik, you showed good leadership in the first 2 scenarios. However, I noted that command shifted during the critical phase. Can you explain what happened?" Korvik glanced at G1, who was sitting in her usual position at the back of the group. G1 identified a solution that our standard procedures had not covered. She provided technical guidance that made the rescue possible. "I see," Hyeon-woo's eyes found one. "And where did this technical knowledge come from?" "General studies, sir," Ji-won replied. "Basic structural engineering is part of required education." Hyeon-woo nodded but made a note on his electronic pad. After 30 years of training cadets, he could recognize the difference between textbook knowledge and field experience. What he had observed in the simulation footage was definitely field experience. That evening in the cafeteria, word of the rescue had spread among the students. Gi-won found herself the subject of curious stares and whispered conversations. Several students who had never spoken to her before approached her table. "That was amazing what you did today," said a Klaxi student from another team. "How did you know the debris would fall that way?" "Lucky guess," Ji-won replied, not looking up from her food. "It did not look like guessing," the student persisted. "It looked like you had done it before." Ji-won finished eating and left without responding. But the conversations continued around her. Students began to speculate about her background, sharing theories about secret training or hidden military connections. In their dorm room that night, Neri was full of excited questions. "Everyone is talking about what you did today," she said, bouncing on her bed. "They are saying you saved that Nexari student's life. They are saying you knew exactly what to do, like you had training none of us have had." One sat at her desk, supposedly reading homework assignments. "People like to create stories when they do not understand something simple," she said. "But it was not simple, was it?" Nari asked more quietly. "I mean, even Korvik could not figure out what to do, and he has been training for this his whole life. Where did you really learn to do things like that?" For a moment, Ji-won's careful composure almost slipped. Nari caught a glimpse of something in her roommate's eyes, something dark and deep and painful. Then Ji-won blinked and it was gone. "I am tired," Ji-won said. "Good night." She turned off her desk light and lay down on her bed, facing the wall. Nari wanted to ask more questions, but something warned her to stay quiet. As the room settled, Into darkness, Ji-won stared at the wall and tried to push away memories that were fighting to surface. Memories of real debris and real screams. Memories of small spaces and desperate rescues where failure meant death. Not just a bad grade, she had worked so hard to bury that part of herself. For 3 years she had practiced being normal, being unremarkable, being safe. But today, for just a few minutes, the mask had slipped. The girl who had survived alone on a dead world had shown herself to her classmates. And now, Ji-won was terrified that they would start asking the right questions. The weeks following the rescue simulation brought changes that Ji-won had hoped to avoid. Students who had never noticed her before now watched her carefully during classes. Conversations stopped when she walked by in hallways. Even the alien students, who usually ignored humans completely, seemed curious about the quiet girl who had solved a problem their best tactical minds could not. Counselor So Young had requested a meeting, which was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in her office on the 5th floor. Gwen arrived exactly on time, as she did for everything else. So Young's office was designed to be comfortable and welcoming, with soft lighting and chairs arranged to encourage conversation rather than interrogation. So Young was a middle-aged human woman with kind eyes and a gentle manner that put most students at ease. She had counseled thousands of cadets from dozens of worlds, helping them adjust to academy life and deal with the stress of training. But as she watched Ji-won enter and sit down, she felt unusually nervous. "Thank you for coming, Ji-won," So Young said, settling into her chair across from the girl. "I hope you do not mind, but this is just a routine check-in. We like to meet with all students periodically to make sure they are adjusting well to academy life." Ji-won sat perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap, face expressionless. "I understand," she said quietly. "How are you finding your classes? Any subjects that are particularly challenging or interesting?" "All subjects are manageable," Ji-won replied. "The instructors are competent and the material is presented clearly." So Young made a note on her pad, though she was really studying Ji-won's body language. The girl sat like a soldier at attention, alert but controlled. Most students her age slouched, fidgeted, or showed some signs of nervous energy. Ji-won was perfectly still. "What about social adjustment? I know it can be difficult being one of the few humans here. Have you made friends? Found study groups or activities you enjoy?" "Other students are friendly," Ji-won said carefully. "I prefer to study alone. Your roommate Nari speaks very highly of you. She says you are a good roommate, very neat and quiet. But she also mentioned that you do not talk much about your home or family. That is perfectly normal, of course, but sometimes sharing experiences helps students feel less homesick." For the first time, Ji-won's perfect composure showed a tiny crack. Her hands tightened slightly in her lap, and her eyes focused on a point just past So Young's shoulder instead of meeting her gaze directly. "My homeworld is not interesting," Ji-won said. "There's little worth discussing." So Young had conducted thousands of these interviews. She recognized evasion when she heard it, and more importantly, she recognized pain. Something in Ji-won's tone carried a weight that went far beyond normal teenage reluctance to discuss family. "Your application listed your home as colony designation K442B, So Young said gently. "That is quite far from the core worlds. What was life like there?" Ji-won was quiet for so long that So Young began to worry she would not answer at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was even quieter than usual. "It was a farming colony. Small population, simple life. Do you miss it? Your family, friends from home?" Another long silence. Ji-won's breathing had become very controlled, the kind of deliberate breathing someone uses to manage strong emotions. "There is nothing to miss," Ji-won said finally. So Young felt a chill run down her spine. The way Ji-won had said those words carried a finality that suggested something terrible. She consulted her notes again, looking for the family contact. Information that should have been part of every student's file. "I notice we do not have emergency contact information for your parents," So Young said carefully. "That is unusual. Academy regulations require ... They are dead." The words came out flat and emotionless, but So Young heard the pain underneath them. She had counseled many students who had lost parents, and she recognized the way grief could hide behind carefully constructed walls. I am so sorry, G1. When did they pass away? Was it recent? 3 years ago? That must have been very difficult. Were you living with other family members after that? Guardians or relatives who helped you prepare for the academy? G1's hands were gripping each other now, knuckles slightly white. There was no one else. So Young set down her pad and leaned forward slightly. G1, I want you to know that everything we discuss here is confidential. My job is to help students, not to judge them or create problems for them. If you need to talk about what happened to your family or about your life before coming here, I am here to listen. For a moment, So Young thought G1 might actually open up. The girl's careful mask seemed to waver, and her dark eyes showed a flash of something desperate and frightened. But then she pulled herself back together, returning to her previous composed state. There is nothing to discuss, Ji-won said. May I be excused? I have studying to complete. So Young wanted to press further, but she could see that Ji-won had reached her limit. Pushing too hard might cause the girl to shut down completely. Of course. But Ji-won, please remember that my door is always open. If you ever want to talk about anything at all, I am here. Ji-won stood up and moved toward the door with her usual precise movements. But just as she reached for the handle, So Young tried one more approach. Ji-won, I have been a counselor for many years. I have worked with students who survived terrible things, who lost everything they cared about, who had to rebuild their lives from nothing. If that describes your situation, please know that you do not have to carry that burden alone. Ji-won stopped with her hand on the door handle. Her shoulders tensed, and for a long moment she stood perfectly still. So Young held her breath, hoping she had found the right words. What happened to your colony, Ji-won? So Young asked very gently. What happened to K442B? That was when Ji-won's careful control finally shattered. She turned around slowly, and So Young saw tears beginning to form in the girl's eyes, but they were not the tears of normal grief. They were the tears of someone who had seen horrors that no 19-year-old should ever witness. They came at night, Ji-won whispered, her voice breaking. The Vorthak, we had no warning, no time to prepare. The defense systems failed in the first attack. The communication arrays were destroyed. No one could call for help. So Young felt her heart racing. The Vorthak were a vicious species known for their brutal attacks on outer colonies. But K442b had been reported as completely destroyed with no survivors. The adults tried to fight, Ji-won continued, sinking back into her chair as if her legs could no longer support her. My parents, the security forces, even the farmers and teachers, they all tried to protect us. But the Vorthak had better weapons, better armor, better tactics. They killed everyone so quickly. How did you survive? So Young asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. I hid, Ji-won said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. When the first explosion started, my mother pushed me into the maintenance tunnels under our building. She told me to run, to hide, to stay quiet no matter what I heard. So I did, So Young reached for a box of tissues, her mind racing. If Ji-won had hidden during the attack, how had she eventually been rescued? The official report stated that recovery teams had found no survivors when they finally reached the colony months later. The tunnels connected to the water treatment plant, the power station, and the waste processing center, Ji-won continued. I could move through the entire colony without being seen. I could hear them above me, the Vorthak, setting up their equipment, establishing their base. They did not just destroy the colony and leave, they stayed. They stayed? So Young repeated, confused. Why would they remain on a destroyed colony? One wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, but the tears kept coming. They were testing new weapons, biological weapons. They needed a controlled environment with no interference from galactic authorities. The colony was perfect for their experiments. So Young felt sick to her stomach. She had read classified reports about Vorthak bioweapon research, But those experiments were supposed to have been conducted on uninhabited worlds. For how long? So Young asked quietly. 8 months, Zhuan replied. 8 months I lived in those tunnels, eating emergency rations and water recycling supplements. 8 months I listened to them working above me, heard their communications, learned their language and their routines. But how did you finally escape? Did rescue ships arrive? One looked up at So Young with eyes that held depths of pain. An experience no teenager should possess. I did not escape, she said quietly. And when the rescue ships finally came, they did not find a destroyed colony with no survivors. They found one 16-year-old girl sitting in the main square, surrounded by the bodies of every Vorthic soldier who had been stationed there. So Young stared at her in shock. What are you saying? I am saying that the official reports were changed, one replied, her voice becoming steadier now that the truth was finally emerging. I'm saying that a single human girl spent 8 months learning everything about her enemies and then systematically killed them all. 200 Vorthic soldiers dead by my hand. The room fell into complete silence. So Young struggled to process what she had just heard. The quiet, shy girl sitting across from her was claiming to have single-handedly eliminated an entire Vorthic occupation force. The military classified everything, one continued. They said it would cause panic if other species knew what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. They said it would damage our reputation for peace and cooperation. So they buried the reports, changed the records, and gave me a new identity. Why are you telling me this now? So Young asked. G-1 wiped the last of her tears and looked directly at the counselor. Because I'm tired of pretending to be someone I am not. Because every day I sit in classes listening to professors explain how weak and emotional humans are, knowing that I have done things that would terrify them. Because that rescue simulation last week reminded everyone, including myself, that I cannot hide forever. So Young realized she was holding her breath. What do you want to do now? I want to stop running from what I did, Zhuan said. I want to stop being ashamed of surviving when everyone else died. But I am terrified that if people know the truth, they will see me as a monster instead of a victim. Good one, So Young said gently. You were 16 years old and completely alone. You did what you had to do to survive. That does not make you a monster. That makes you incredibly strong. For the first time since entering the office, G1 smiled slightly. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. I hope others see it that way, she said. Because I think my secret is not going to stay secret much longer. The secret lasted exactly 3 days. Counselor So Young had immediately contacted Commander Wu Jin, the Academy's administrator, about G1's revelation. She knew that information of this magnitude could not remain buried, especially with G1's growing visibility among the students. The truth would come out eventually, and it was better to control how it happened. Commander Wu Jin was a tall, serious man with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had seen real combat. When So Young finished explaining what G1 had told her, he sat in silence for a long time, staring out the window of his office at the academy grounds below. I was there, he said finally. What do you mean? So Young asked. I was part of the rescue team that found her. Captain Wu Jin then, serving under Admiral Kim, we arrived at K442, be expecting to document another Vorthic massacre and recover whatever remained for proper burial. He turned away from the window to face So Young. What we found instead changed. Everything I thought I knew about warfare. So Young leaned forward. What exactly did you find? A 16-year-old girl sitting in the main square of the colony, wearing clothes she had sewn together from salvaged materials. She was clean, alert, and completely calm. Around her, arranged in neat rows, were the bodies of every Vorthic soldier who had been stationed at the colony. 212 of them, to be exact. How had she killed them? Wu Jin opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a classified file folder. Every method you can imagine, and several that are best. Military analysts had never seen before. Poison gas created from common industrial chemicals. Explosive traps built from mining equipment. Sniper attacks using modified construction tools. Hand-to-hand combat with improvised weapons. She had turned the entire colony into a death trap. So young. Felt a chill. What did she say when you found her? She asked if we had brought food that was not emergency rations because she was tired of eating the same thing every day. Then she gave us a complete tactical report on Vorthak communication systems, weapon capabilities, and operational procedures. She had learned their language perfectly and understood their military structure better than our intelligence officers. Why? Was it all classified? Wu Jin closed the file. Because the galactic community was not ready to know that humans could be that dangerous. We were still trying to establish ourselves as a peaceful species worthy of trust and cooperation. The idea that a single human child could eliminate an entire enemy force using nothing but determination and creativity would have terrified our potential allies. And now? Now that girl is sitting in our classrooms, listening to alien professors explain why humans are too weak and emotional for real combat. Now she has demonstrated tactical abilities that put our best students to shame. Now the secret is starting to unravel whether we want it to or not. They decided to tell the truth, but carefully. Wu Jin would speak privately with the senior instructors first, then arrange a controlled disclosure to the student body. They hoped to manage the situation before rumors and speculation made everything worse. But secrets have a way of escaping even the most careful plans. It started when instructor Haiyan Wu was reviewing training footage from the rescue simulation. He had watched Ji-won's performance dozens of times, trying to understand how she had solved the structural puzzle so quickly. Something about her movements, her instant assessment of the situation, reminded him of veteran soldiers he had known. On impulse, he ran her academy identification through the military database, looking for any previous training records. What he found was a classification level so high that it triggered automatic security alerts. Within an hour, Han was sitting in Commander Wu Jin's office, demanding answers. "Sir, I need to know what I am dealing with," Haiyan Wu said bluntly. "That girl has combat experience that goes far beyond anything in her official record. If she is some kind of special forces operative, I need to adjust my training methods." Accordingly, Wu Jin realized that the careful disclosure plan was about to become irrelevant. "She is not special forces," he said. "She is something much more dangerous. She is a survivor." When Han Wu heard the full story, his reaction was immediate and practical. "We need to change how we are training her. She does not need to learn basic tactics. She needs to learn how to teach others and how to lead teams. Her experience is too valuable to waste on standard curriculum." "That is exactly what we cannot do," Wu Jin replied. "The moment we start treating her differently, questions will be asked. The alien instructors will want to know why a human student is receiving special consideration." But their conversation was overheard by a maintenance worker who was repairing communication equipment in the adjacent room. The worker, a Klaxi named Tek Tak, had excellent hearing and an unfortunate tendency to gossip. By evening, word was spreading through the alien student dormitories that the quiet human girl had some kind of secret military background. The details were confused and exaggerated, but the basic idea was spreading rapidly. Korvik, the Nexari student who had led the rescue simulation team, heard the rumors during dinner. His first reaction was disbelief, followed by curiosity, and finally by something approaching respect. He remembered how confidently Ji-won had solved the rescue problem, how her commands had been delivered with absolute authority. The next morning, he approached Ji-won directly. She was sitting at her usual table in the cafeteria, eating breakfast alone while reading a tactical manual. Korvik sat down across from her without invitation, his blue skin showing the silver patterns that indicated serious intent. "I heard interesting rumors about you," he said without preamble. Ji-won looked up from her book, her expression carefully neutral. "People often create stories about things they do not understand. The stories say you have real combat experience, that you fought in an actual war." Korvik leaned forward. "I want to know if that is true." For a moment, one considered lying. She could deflect the question, change the subject, or simply walk away. But as she looked at Korvek's earnest face, she realized she was tired of pretending. "Yes," she said quietly, "it is true." Korvek's eyes widened. "How much combat experience?" "Enough." "Against what enemy?" Ji-won closed her book and looked directly at him. "Vorthek." The word hit Korvek like a physical blow. The Vorthak were legendary for their brutality and effectiveness in combat. They were the species that other species used to frighten their children. The idea that this small human girl had fought them and survived was almost impossible to believe. "How many battles?" he asked. "It was not battles," Ji-won replied. "It was a war. 8 months of warfare, and I won." Word of this conversation spread even faster than the original rumors. By afternoon, students from multiple species were approaching Ji-won with questions, challenges, and requests for demonstrations. Some wanted to know if the stories were true. Others wanted to test her skills for themselves. Nari found her roommate surrounded by a crowd of students in the dormitory common area, all talking at once and demanding answers. Ji-won looked overwhelmed and trapped like a small animal surrounded by predators. "Everyone back off," Nari said loudly, pushing through the crowd. "Give her some space to breathe." But the pressure only increased over the following days. Alien students who had previously ignored humans entirely now watched Ji-won with a mixture of fear and fascination. Some of the more aggressive species, particularly young Nexari males, began challenging her to combat demonstrations. "If you really fought Vorthak and won, prove it," a student named Veltar demanded during combat training class. "Show us these amazing human fighting techniques." Ji-won tried to decline, but instructor Hyun-woo, who now knew her full background, made the decision for her. "Veltar, you will spar with Ji-won," he announced. "Standard Academy rules. First, to achieve submission hold wins." The entire class gathered around the practice mat. Veltar was larger and stronger than Ji-won, with the natural advantages of his species. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a training match. The fight lasted exactly 12 seconds, or one moved like water, flowing around. Veltar's attacks and striking at points he did not even know were vulnerable. She used his strength against him, redirected his momentum, and applied leverage in ways that seemed to defy physics. When Veltar found himself on the ground with Ji-won's arm around his throat in a perfect submission hold, he was too shocked to struggle. "Yield," Ji-won said quietly. The class stood in stunned silence. They had just watched a small human girl effortlessly defeat one of their best fighters using techniques none of them recognized. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" asked a Gravani student. Ji-won released Veltar and helped him to his feet. "I learned from the best teachers available," she said. "My enemies." That evening, Commander Woo Jin called an emergency assembly for all students and faculty. The truth could no longer be contained, and it was time for full disclosure. Ji-won sat in the front row, no longer trying to hide in the back. The entire academy knew her secret now, and there was no point in pretending to be invisible. "Students and faculty," Commander Woo Jin began, "I want to address the rumors that have been circulating about one of our cadets. The information you have heard is largely accurate, though incomplete." He gestured toward Gwon. "Cadet Ji-won is indeed a combat veteran. She is the sole survivor of the K442B colony massacre, and she spent 8 months conducting single-handed warfare against a Vorthak occupation force. She eliminated over 200 enemy soldiers using improvised tactics and weapons." The auditorium erupted in shocked murmurs and exclamations. Many students had heard pieces of the story, but hearing the full truth delivered officially made it real in a way that rumors could not. "This information was classified for diplomatic reasons," Woo Jin continued. "But given recent events, we believe it is time for full transparency. Cadet Ji-won represents something unique in galactic history. She demonstrates that humans, when pushed to their absolute limits, are capable of extraordinary things." A Nexari professor stood up. "Commander, if this human possesses such dangerous capabilities, should she be training alongside other students? What guarantee do we have that she will not become violent again?" Ji-won stood up slowly and turned to face the assembled crowd. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I did not fight because I wanted to," she said. "I fought because everyone I loved was dead and I had no other choice. I killed because it was the only way to survive and honor the memory of my people. I came to this academy because I want to use what I learned to protect others, not to hurt them." She paused, looking around the room at hundreds of faces from dozens of species. "You want to know if I am dangerous? Yes, I am. Every one of us should be dangerous to those who would harm innocent people. The question is not whether I am capable of violence. The question is whether I can be trusted to use that capability for the right reasons." The auditorium fell silent. Then slowly Taemin stood up and began clapping. Nari joined him, then Korvek, then other students throughout the room. Within moments, most of the assembly was applauding, but not everyone. Ji-won could see the fear in some faces, the suspicion in others. She had revealed her true nature, but she had also divided the academy into those who saw her as a hero and those who saw her as a threat. The real test would come in the days ahead, when she would have to prove that the monster who had stalked the ruins of K442B could coexist with the protector she wanted to become. The weeks following the public revelation brought both opportunities and challenges that Ji-won had not expected. Some students sought her out for combat training advice, while others avoided her completely. The academy's atmosphere had changed, becoming more tense and divided. 3 alien instructors resigned, claiming they could not teach alongside someone with such a violent background. Several Naxari families threatened to withdraw their children unless Ji-won was removed from the program. But an equal number of students and faculty rallied to support her, arguing that her experience made the academy stronger, not weaker. Commander Woo Jin assigned Ji-won to special duties, allowing her to assist with tactical training for advanced students. She found herself teaching techniques that were not in any manual, sharing knowledge that had been earned through necessity rather than study. During one such session, she was working with a mixed group of senior students on urban combat scenarios. The lesson was interrupted by urgent alarms throughout the academy. "All students report to designated safe areas immediately," announced the emergency broadcast system. "This is not a drill. Hostile forces have been detected approaching the academy. All students report to designated safe areas immediately." The academy transformed instantly from a place of learning into a fortress under siege. Emergency blast shields sealed the windows, defensive systems activated throughout the building. Students and faculty moved quickly but calmly to reinforced areas deep within the structure. From the safe area in sub-level 3, G1 could hear the sounds of battle above. Energy weapons fired in rapid bursts. Explosions shook the building's foundation. The emergency lighting flickered as power systems struggled to maintain function. "What is happening up there?" asked a frightened first-year student. Instructor Hen Wu, who had been monitoring communications, looked grim. "Vorthak attack ships, 3 vessels heavily armed. They have landed ground forces on the academy grounds and are attempting to breach the main building." One felt her blood turn cold. The Vorthak had found her. After 3 years of hiding, they had tracked her down to finish what they had started on K442B. "How many ground troops?" she asked. "Estimated 40 soldiers with advanced combat equipment," Hyun-woo replied. "Our security forces are engaged, but they are outnumbered and outgunned." Around them, students from various species huddled together. In fear, many had never experienced real combat, only training simulations. The sounds of actual warfare were terrifying and alien to their sheltered academy lives. "The academy's defenses should hold," said Professor Kelver, the elderly Naxari who had often criticized human capabilities. "These buildings were designed to withstand orbital bombardment." As if in response to his words, a massive explosion rocked the safe area. Dust fell from the ceiling, and several students cried out in alarm. "They are using plasma charges," Ji-won said quietly. "Specifically designed to breach reinforced structures. They will get through the defenses within an hour." "How do you know that?" Kelver demanded. Because I have seen Vortex siege tactics before, Ji-won replied. This is not a random attack. They have studied this building, planned this assault, and brought exactly the right equipment to succeed. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights went out completely, leaving them in darkness except for emergency lighting that cast strange shadows on the walls. They are targeting me, Ji-won said into the darkness. This attack is not about destroying the academy or harming the students. They want to eliminate the human who embarrassed their species and prove that their previous failure was just luck. Taemin, who was sitting nearby, spoke up. What do you mean? I killed over 200 of their soldiers and disrupted a major bioweapon research project. That kind of defeat damages their reputation throughout the galaxy. They need to prove it was not because of superior human tactics, but because of circumstances that will not happen again. Nari grabbed Ji-won's arm. Are you saying they came here just for you? Yes, and they will not stop until either I am dead or they are. The safe area fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle. Students looked at each other with growing understanding and fear. They were trapped in the middle of a personal war between Ji-won and the species that had destroyed her world. So what do we do? Asked Korvek. Wait here and hope the defenses hold. Ji-won stood up slowly, her decision already made. You stay here where it is safe. I go up there and end this. Absolutely not, Instructor Hyun-woo said firmly. You are a student, not a soldier. The security forces will handle this situation. The security forces are dying, Woo-won replied bluntly. I can hear the change in weapons fire. Fewer academy weapons, more Vorthak weapons they are losing. She moved toward the sealed door of the safe area. I know Vorthak tactics better than anyone else alive. I know their weaknesses, their blind spots, their communication protocols. I can stop this attack, but only if I act now. It is suicide, Professor Kelver said. One person cannot defeat 40 trained soldiers. Ji-won turned to look at him, and in the dim emergency lighting, her expression was calm and deadly serious. Professor, you have spent months explaining to your classes why humans are too weak and emotional for real combat. You have said we panic under pressure and cannot think strategically. Would you like to see how wrong you have been? Before anyone could stop her, Ji-won had activated the door override and slipped out of the safe area. The corridor beyond was dark and filled with smoke from the battle above. She moved through the academy like a ghost, using maintenance passages and service tunnels that most people did not even know existed. The layout was different from her. Destroyed colony, but the principles were the same. Every building had hidden paths, forgotten spaces, and overlooked vulnerabilities. The Vorthak had entered through the main entrance, and were fighting their way through the central corridors, toward the safe areas. Their tactics were exactly what Ji-won had expected, efficient and brutal, but also predictable. They moved in standard formation, checked corners in regulation sequence, and communicated using their traditional military codes. She had listened to those same codes for 8 months. While hiding in the tunnels of her dead world, she knew every signal, every tactical turn. Every command structure they used. The first Vorthak soldier died without ever knowing he was being hunted. Ji-won dropped from a ventilation shaft directly behind him, applied a submission hold she had perfected years ago, and dragged his body into a storage room. She took his weapon, his communication device, and his identification codes. The second soldier died when Ji-won triggered a trap using the Academy's fire suppression system. Pressurized foam filled the corridor, blinding him long enough for her to strike at the weak points in his armor that she had memorized during months of studying dead Vorthak bodies. By the time the third soldier died, the others had realized they were no longer the hunters. Command, this is Ground Team Leader, came the urgent transmission through the stolen communication device. We have lost contact with perimeter guards. Possible hostile infiltration of our formation. Impossible, replied the command voice. All Academy personnel are contained in safe areas. Continue the mission. Ji-won smiled grimly as she monitored their communications. They could not accept that a single Academy student was systematically eliminating their assault team. It went against everything they believed about human capabilities. She used the Academy's own systems against them, turning off lights to create darkness, activating security doors to separate their forces, and manipulating the environmental controls to create confusion and distraction. Every lesson she had learned during her 8-month war was applied with deadly precision. The Vorthak began to panic as their soldiers disappeared one by one. Their disciplined formation broke down as they tried to defend against an enemy they could not see or understand. "This is impossible," the ground team leader transmitted. "Humans do not fight like this. Humans cannot fight like this." In the final confrontation, G1 faced the remaining 15 Vorthak soldiers in the Academy's main auditorium. They had barricaded themselves behind overturned furniture, weapons trained on all entrances. Demanding to know who was attacking them, G-1 entered through the ventilation system above the stage, dropping down behind their defensive position. Like a shadow made solid, in the confused firefight that followed, her superior knowledge of Vorthak equipment and tactics proved decisive. When the sounds of battle finally stopped, silence fell over the Academy. In Sub-Level 3, the students and faculty waited anxiously for news. The communication systems had been damaged during the fighting, leaving them with no information about what was happening above. Then the safe area door opened, and G1 walked in. She was covered in dust and smoke, her Academy uniform torn and stained. She carried a Vorthak weapon in one hand and their communication device in the other. Her face was calm, but her eyes held the same terrible depth that Nari had glimpsed before. "It is over," she said quietly. "The Vorthak forces have been eliminated. The Academy is secure." The safe area erupted in cheers and celebrations, but Ji-won did not join in. She set down the alien weapons and sat heavily on a bench. Suddenly, looking very young and very tired, Tae-min approached her carefully. "Are you hurt?" "No," she replied. "But 43 soldiers are dead, and I killed them all." The celebration quieted as the reality of what had happened sank in. Ji-won had single-handedly defeated an entire Vorthak assault force, but she took no pride in the victory. Each death was a burden, not a triumph. "You saved us," Nari said, sitting down beside her. "You saved everyone in the Academy?" "I know," Ji-won replied, "but that does not make it easier." Commander Woo-jin arrived with Academy security forces and medical teams. The building was secured, the wounded were treated, and the damage was assessed. The Vorthak attack had been completely repelled with minimal casualties. Among Academy personnel, when the reports were filed and the immediate crisis was over, Woo-jin found Ji-won in her dormitory room, staring out the window at the Academy grounds, where Vorthak ships still smoldered. "The galactic media wants to interview you," he said. "This battle will be studied in military academies throughout known space. You have proven something important about human capabilities." "I have proven that I am very good at killing," Ji-won replied without turning from the window. "I am not sure that is something the galaxy needs to know." "It is something the galaxy needs to understand," Woo-jin corrected. "For too long, other species have seen humans as weak newcomers who need protection. Today you showed them that humans can be protectors as well as protected." Ji-won finally turned to look at him. "And what happens now?" "Now you help us figure out what comes next," Woo-jin said. "The Academy will never be the same after today." "Neither will you. The question is whether we use this change to build something better." Through her window, Ji-won could see students from various species working together to repair damage from the battle. Alien and human cadets side by side, united by their shared experience of survival and their respect for the small human girl who had saved them all. For the first time in 3 years, Ji-won began to think that maybe her dark past could lead to a brighter future. 6 months after the Vorthak attack, the Galactic Defense Academy had become a very different place. The battle that nearly destroyed it had instead transformed it into something stronger and more unified than ever before. Ji-won stood at the front of Classroom 7, addressing a group of mixed-species students in advanced tactical theory. The same room where she had once hidden in the back corner was now where she taught the next generation of galactic defenders. The key to successful urban warfare is not superior firepower, she explained to the attentive faces before her. It is understanding your environment better than your enemy does. Every building, every tunnel, every ventilation system can become either a weapon or a shield, depending on how you use it. A young Gravani student raised his rocky hand. Instructor, G1, how do you learn to see these opportunities so quickly? G1 paused, considering her answer carefully. Months of teaching had helped her find ways to share hard-earned knowledge without sharing the pain that had created it. Experience teaches you to look for what others miss, she said. But more importantly, necessity teaches you that giving up is not an option. When you truly understand that failure means death for yourself and others you care about, you find solutions that seemed impossible before. The students took notes eagerly. They came from dozens of worlds and species, but they all shared the same respect for their instructor. The quiet girl who had once been invisible was now one of the most requested teachers at the academy. After class, G1 walked through corridors that still showed some repair work from the battle. But the scars had become symbols of resilience, rather than reminders of trauma. Students pointed them out to visitors with pride, explaining how their academy had survived the impossible dot in the faculty lounge. She found Professor Kelver reviewing applications for the next semester. The elderly Nexari looked up as she entered, his expression warm with the respect that had replaced his former dismissive attitude. G1, he said. I wanted to discuss the new curriculum proposals with you. Several other academies have requested copies of your tactical training methods. It seems your teaching style is becoming quite famous throughout the galaxy. Fame was never the goal, G1 replied, settling into a chair across from him. But if sharing what I learned helps protect others, then I am glad to do it, Kelver nodded thoughtfully. I owe you an apology. For months I taught my classes that humans were too emotional and weak for serious military consideration. I was completely wrong, and my prejudice could have cost lives if you had not been here to prove otherwise. You were not wrong about humans being emotional, G1 said with a slight smile. You were wrong about thinking that was a weakness. Human emotions, properly channeled, can accomplish things that pure logic never could. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Taemin and Nari, who had both graduated and returned to the academy as junior instructors. Taemin taught leadership and communication, while Nari specialized in interspecies relations and conflict resolution. One, you need to see this, Taemin said excitedly, holding up a data pad. The Nexari Federation just issued an official apology to humanity for their previous statements about human military capabilities. They are also requesting a formal alliance treaty. About time, Nari added. After what happened here, even the most stubborn species had to admit they were wrong about us. G1 looked at the formal documents on the data pad. The language was diplomatic and careful, but the meaning was clear. Humanity had earned respect through strength, and that respect was opening doors that had been closed before. There is more, Taemin continued. Commander Wu Jin wants to see you in his office. Apparently there are some very important visitors who want to meet you. G1 made her way to the commander's office, wondering what new challenge awaited her. Since the battle, she had received requests for interviews, offers to write books about her experiences, and invitations to speak at military academies throughout the galaxy. She had declined most of them, preferring to focus on teaching rather than publicity. Commander Wu Jin's office was crowded with visitors when she arrived. She recognized Admiral Kim, the military officer who had led her rescue from K442B 3 years ago. There were also several aliens in formal diplomatic attire, including what appeared to be a high-ranking Nexari official. G1, please come in, Wu Jin said. I would like you to meet Ambassador Ralmoth of the Nexari Federation and General Vekvar of the Gravani Military Council. They have traveled a long way to speak with you. The Nexari ambassador stood and bowed in the formal style of his people. Instructor G1, it is an honor to meet the human who has changed how the galaxy views your species. Your actions here and your survival on K442 have become legendary throughout known space. I was just doing what needed to be done, Ji-won replied carefully. Nothing more. Modest as well as capable, rumbled General Lekvar in his deep, Gravani voice. We have come with a proposal that we believe will benefit all our peoples. Admiral Kim leaned forward. G1, they want to establish a new type of military training program. A joint academy where the best students from all species would learn advanced tactical methods, and they want you to be the chief instructor. G1 felt a familiar mix of honor and responsibility. Why me? Because you have proven something that no one else could, Ambassador Ralmoth explained. You have shown that a single individual, properly trained and motivated, can overcome impossible odds. More importantly, you have shown that humans bring unique capabilities to galactic defense that no other species possesses. What kind of capabilities? One asked. General Lekvar consulted his notes. Adaptability under extreme stress. Creative. Problem-solving when conventional methods fail. The ability to continue fighting when surrender would be logical. And perhaps most valuable of all, the willingness to sacrifice for others without thought of reward. These are not uniquely human traits, Ji-won protested. Perhaps not individually, Admiral Kim said. But the combination and the intensity with which humans display them appears to be unique. Your species has gone from a single world to a galactic presence in record time. You have faced challenges that destroyed other civilizations and emerged stronger. The galaxy needs that kind of resilience. Ji-won walked to the window, looking out at the academy grounds where students from dozens of species trained together. Mixed groups practiced combat techniques, studied tactical theory, and learned to work as unified teams despite their differences. What would this new academy teach? She asked. Survival, Ambassador Ralmoth replied simply. How to continue? Fighting when everything seems lost. How to turn disadvantages into advantages. How to protect others when you barely have the strength to protect yourself. The lessons you learned alone on a dead world, taught to the defenders of living ones. Ji-won thought about the months she had spent hiding in tunnels, studying her enemies, learning to fight with nothing but determination and improvised weapons. Could those desperate lessons really help train galactic peacekeepers? There is one condition, she said finally. If I agree to this, the Academy must accept students from all species, including those considered weak or unsuitable for military service. The galaxy is full of overlooked people who might surprise everyone if given the chance. Agreed, said General Lekvar immediately. Your own example proves that appearances can be very deceiving. The meeting continued for several hours, working out details and discussing implementation. When the visitors finally left, Ji-won remained behind with Commander Woo-jin. Are you sure about this? He asked. It is a big responsibility, and it will put you in the spotlight more than ever before. I am sure, Ji-won replied. For 3 years I tried to hide from what I had done, to pretend I was just a normal student. But normal students do not survive what I survived. And normal instructors cannot teach what the galaxy needs to learn. Which is? That the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who sit in the back and seem unremarkable might be exactly who you want fighting beside you when everything goes wrong. 6 months later, the Advanced Survival and Tactical Academy opened on a new world at the edge of civilized space. Students came from every known species, many of them considered unfit for traditional military training. They were the small ones, the quiet ones, the ones with physical limitations or social disadvantages. Ji-won stood before the first graduating class, looking out at faces that reminded her of her own academy days. There was a shy Klaxi who had been rejected by her own military for being too small, a Gravani with a speech impediment who had been told he could never be a leader, a human girl from a farming world who reminded Ji-won painfully of herself at that age. When I was your age, Ji-won began, I sat in the back of classrooms and tried to be invisible. I thought that being small and quiet meant being weak. I thought that surviving was something that happened to other people, stronger people, more important people. The students listened intently. They knew her story, but hearing her tell it personally was different. I learned that I was wrong. I learned that strength comes not from size or status, but from the refusal to give up when giving up would be easier. I learned that the galaxy is full of people who are stronger than they know, braver than they believe, and more capable than anyone gives them credit for. She paused, looking directly at the shy Claxi in the front row. You are all here because someone saw potential in you that others missed. My job was to help you find that potential in yourselves. Your job is to use it to protect others who cannot protect themselves. After the ceremony, as students celebrated with families and friends, G1 stood alone on a balcony overlooking the academy grounds. The new world was beautiful, with twin suns setting behind mountains that reminded her of home before it was destroyed. Min and Nari joined her, along with several other friends from their academy days who had come for the graduation. Any regrets? Nari asked. About leaving the quiet life behind. G1 smiled, the first completely genuine smile her friends had seen from her in years. The quiet life was never really an option, she said. I was never meant to sit in the back and be invisible. I was meant to teach others that they do not have to be invisible either. A young cadet approached the group, nervous but determined. She was human, probably 16 years old, with the same careful posture and watchful eyes that G1 had once possessed. Instructor G1, the girl said quietly. My name is Min Young. I wanted to thank you for accepting me into the program. The other academies said I was too small, too quiet, too ordinary. Ji-won studied the girl's face, seeing herself reflected there. The same uncertainty, the same hidden strength waiting to be discovered. What world are you from, Min-young? She asked gently. Colony designation L394C. It is a small mining world. Nothing special ever happens there. I thought the same thing about my home world, Ji-won replied. Until something very special did happen. Sometimes ordinary places produce extraordinary people. The trick is recognizing the extraordinary when you see it. Min Young's eyes widened slightly. Do you really think I could become someone important? Someone who makes a difference? V1 placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. I think you already are someone important, you just do not know it yet. My job is to help you discover what you are truly capable of. As the girl walked away, with new confidence in her step, Taemin chuckled softly. She reminds me of someone I used to know, he said. A quiet girl who sat in the back of classrooms and thought no one noticed her. Everyone noticed her, Nari corrected. They just did not understand what they were seeing. Ji-won watched Min Young rejoin a group of other new cadets already, beginning to make friends and find her place among them. The academy grounds were filled with students from dozens of worlds, all of them learning that being different was not the same as being weak. The galaxy is changing, she said thoughtfully. Species that have been enemies for centuries are learning to work together. Young people who were told they were not good enough are proving everyone wrong. Maybe what happened on K442b, terrible as it was, led to something good after all. Your parents would be proud, Nari said softly. Gu-won nodded, feeling the truth of those words. Her parents had died believing in peace and cooperation between species. They had raised her to protect others and stand up for what was right. In her own way, through her own dark path, she had honored their memory as the twin suns finally set behind the mountains. Gi-won looked out over the academy one more time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students to train, new lessons to teach. But tonight, she was content. The silent girl who had once hidden in the back of classrooms was silent no more. She had found her voice, her purpose, and her place in the galaxy. And she was teaching others to find theirs as well. The war she had fought alone was over. The war they would fight together was just beginning, but this time she would not be facing it in silence or in solitude. This time she would be surrounded by allies who understood that. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places. The Academy's lights began to come on as darkness fell, illuminating the paths where future defenders of the galaxy would walk. And at the center of it all, no longer hiding in shadows or corners, stood the woman who had proven that humans belonged among the stars not as junior partners, but as equals. G1 smiled one more time and headed inside. There were lesson plans to prepare, and tomorrow was going to be a very busy day.